It's showtime, folks. Enjoy the show.
And a fine Saturday morning to you.
It's a fine Saturday morning and a very special episode. It's a VSP.
Hello.
JJ's finally coming of age.
Yeah, we have JJ. We may see Steve pop up. We'll see.
As long as you keep the moil away from me, I'm happy.
It is early. It is early the day after Christmas as we record this, and we think Steve may have gotten run over by a reindeer.
Does that mean Steve is grandma?
Yeah,
I had
today.
no idea.
He may.
Yeah. Could it be something with the time thing? Could it be maybe confusing about the Arizona?
I don't think so.
Portland time.
We are.
Arizona is confusing, but he usually is on top of that. So, Andy, why are we here? What are we doing today?
Well, we decided, perhaps foolishly, but we decided to venture into list territory, and here we are. We decided to do our the TNR team's top 25 lists of the decade, the 2010s, regardless of the argument of the decade starting in 2010 or 2011.
10 years of movies.
We're
right?
doing 10 years of movies from 2010 through 2019. We are looking at our favorite 25. I don't know. I guess we should discuss. Are they our favorites? Are they the best? What are they?
They're my favorites. And I'm really glad that we're having this conversation about numbers right now, because if I had done that wrong, like I have some 2010s in here, so that's going to really mess things up. But yeah, no, they're my favorites, but I think that means best for me, right? I mean, these are the best movies for me. And because there are movies that would end up on other best lists, I wouldn't try to be objective, in making my own best list. I want to say, since you've given me the power with which to say these are the best movies, I'm going to make them that they're my favorites. So,
yeah, I think the only thing for me is that when I was approaching this list, the thing that I found difficult for this list was if I just look at my flick chart, it is like the top 25 is chock full of the major franchises. And I had some real trouble with, like, I wanted to put an artificial break on how many of the major franchises make it into my top list, because there were so many movies that I do consider my top. And so I have a number of different variations of my list, and some of them like the one I think I'm going to go with includes, I think, one of each of the major franchises.
I like that methodology.
Then sort of it rolls them up in that movie. Let's just say. I don't know, Andy, you're one all about rules.
Right. I kind of did something similar, because mine had more than I liked of a lot of those franchises. And so I thinned it out. My methodology was not so much the franchise. It was more, although it ended up being that way, but it was more specifically to director. And so I didn't let a film end up in my top 25 from the same director twice. And sometimes a lot of it was just to help thin it out, because my list was pretty beefy. And so I had to have some, real battles between a couple films from the same director, trying to kind of cut it down to just one film. And so I will have some in here that I'm like, gosh, I wish that other film was in here too. But
wow, you held yourself to that. I will say I wouldn't want to do that, because foreshadowing or spoiler alert, 1 and 2. So I would definitely not want to do that. Right. So, but yeah, I think I think both and doing it from a franchise perspective, doing it from a director perspective, I think those are both interesting methodologies, but I wouldn't want to do that for my own list for the reasons I just described.
No. And right. Cause it hurts. That's why.
See, why hurt yourself? This is supposed to be for fun. Let's indulge. But
I did it for variety's sake, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I started feeling like Andy talks about big battles. Like I found myself arguing with myself in a way that was kind of I don't know, weird. There's a sad Pete in there somewhere who was like, oh, come on, Pete. You know that there are movies that are like movie 26, 27, 28. They're so sad if you put just all Star Wars movies on there. So let's just roll it up and say they're representative and be done. You're going to be okay. So,
well, if the Oscars can do it by awarding Return of the King Best Picture to cover all three of the films, then we can too.
Andy, that is a great point. We are the new Oscars.
That's sad, I guess.
Welcome to the next release.
We're the Tinners.
And I guess we should just say
and
as a last, or not a last note, because Pete's got something to say, but we aren't full-time film critics, so there are plenty of movies that we haven't seen. This is based on just what we've seen.
That's a super good point. Yes.
Well, yes. And the only thing I was going to add is that you'll know that when you hear Tommy's list, because he only comes with 17 and they're in alphabetical order.
For a decade. Exactly.
Oh, so good.
And he's not only not a critic, but he's a filmmaker.
That's right.
Okay. How would you like to start, Andy?
I guess we'll just take it away, and we'll just start with number 25 and work our way down to number 1. So
great.
Who wants to kick it off?
I'll do mine.
All right. Take it away, JJ.
My number 25 is Edge of Tomorrow with Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise. I was surprised that it came in so low for me. But yes, 25 of the decade for me, Edge of Tomorrow.
That was so close to being on my list, and that was one that I really wanted.
Didn't make yours. Interesting.
Wow.
I don't know why I couldn't squeeze it in, but I just had others that ended up pushing ahead of it.
Okay. My number 25 is Zero Dark 30, 2012.
Oh, sure.
Which is great. I just watched The Report last night, and what a way to kind of follow that film up.
I noticed that. So, Oh, and I loved that it actually did well for you. That excites me.
Didn't make my list either, but such a great movie. I wouldn't pull anything from that.
Yeah, it didn't make my list, but it's another one it's way up there for me. For my 25, this is a film that I think I was actually surprised it ended up. I kind of was surprised it made my list, but then I was like, I really shouldn't be surprised because it's a great movie and it's so intense. It's Whiplash from Damien Chazelle. So that's my number 25.
Oh, well, I don't need to say anything about that yet.
Not yet.
It'll be a while before I say that again.
Not yet, sir. Not yet.
I figured that I would probably be the one with the lowest showing of that one out here.
There you go.
But man, is it good.
Okay, and then so we're going to do with Tommy's list. We said there's 17.
So we'll start with him at 17.
So he'll come at 17.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's back to you, JJ.
Okay, so we want to do 24 for me. I have The Big Short, 2014.
Really?
Yeah. And I think this was surprising to me somewhat that it made my list, but it was an Oscar celebrated movie.
Oh, sure.
So don't feel bad about it being there, and it was very affecting to me. It was a very remarkable film when I watched it. So I was, for me, it merited being on the list at 24.
That's so funny. That one actually, I would be talking about it. I love it so much, but it's in the top 30. Let's just say that. It didn't actually make my top.
I'm surprised, because I like you, JJ, I put a whole list together and it just kept going until I hit 60 and it didn't end up on there. And I'm like, God, did I just forget about that one completely? I must have, because
I'm concerned about that for us too, by the way, because there's so many movies in a decade.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure of it.
And I have I talked about this a little before, but I have a good list of 52. So if it pops into my later half, we'll do it that way. So
perfect.
And we're go.
Okay,
welcome,
yay! Look who's
top of the morning, Andy and JJ and Pete.
The fast forward catch up.
So wow. Okay, so you guys have been recording for half an hour and you got through one movie, huh?
Okay. A heck of a start. Well, to be fair, we waited for somebody who's along.
Yes, all right.
There was a lot of that.
Okay.
What's your 25, Steve?
My 25, Room.
Okay.
Excellent.
Sure.
That just missed the cut for me.
Haven't seen it.
Oh, really? It's
that would be an intense one for you, JJ.
Yeah, it would be very intense. It's one that, as my wife and I were looking at some of the top lists for each of the years, she was like, how come no one's mentioning Room? And I'm like, I don't know. And that's one that just, I think is easy to forget, but, Brie Larson wins an Academy Award, right? And just a really powerful movie. I think it's one that put her on the radar, and I think it's one that's worth remembering for the decade.
Absolutely.
Totally. All right. So we were on 20. JJ, we were on 24. That catches up. So Steve is now caught up. JJ did The Big Short. So is it my turn?
24 for you is
awesome. Well, my 24 is Knives Out.
Wow.
I tried as hard as I could to avoid the curse of recency and at least be a little bit level-headed, but I so enjoyed Knives Out. It just landed right up near the top.
Of the decade. Love to hear that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I also went with the 2019 film for my 24 spot. And I will say, I did actually try to make sure I had at least one film represented from each year. That was one other rule I had for myself.
I don't know if I have a 2019.
Well, my 2019 is not, I know you didn't see it, JJ. I don't know who else did, but it was a fantastically freaky horror movie. It was Midsummer, which really just was Ari Aster's just kind of a beautifully horrifying film in every way. I just completely loved it. So that was my number 24.
Now, Tommy loved that movie too, and I don't think he put that on his list. No, he didn't. I think
he did. It's on his list.
Did he didn't make it to the M's?
I thought I saw it.
Never mind.
Oh, no, you're right.
I'm not sure.
He loved that movie, so he might have missed that one. But I think that whole 2019 thing is kind of difficult. I'm looking at my list. I don't think I have a 2019 on my list. Yeah. So, that's not true. I do. Okay, anyway, keep going. All right. Steve, 24.
All right, Steve.
24. What did I put? Oh, this one. Oh, JJ. This will be on your list, I'm pretty sure. This is one that I'd heard a lot about, and I remember my brother had seen it, and it was like, I can't believe you haven't seen this movie. So he had already seen it. I'm watching it. I don't know how to take the tone of this movie. He's laughing hysterically. I'm like, what is wrong with him? This is a really weird movie. Then my wife hadn't seen it, so I watched it with her. I'm laughing hysterically the second time I see it because I'm starting to get it, and she's like, what's wrong with you? With my number 24 movie, The Lobster.
Yay, The Lobster. I love that you call it hysterical. Of course, it's going to show up on my list, but in a much later point.
Yes, but it's one that, the first time you're like, this is just strange, and then the second time you know what's going on, and it's hilarious. Yes.
Cool.
That came close to landing on my list, but didn't quite make the cut. That was a great one, though.
Okay,
all right.
23.
23.
23 for me is The Force Awakens.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so all
right.
you franchise people out there, maybe we'll hear stuff from that franchise later for you, but that is the top Star Wars movie on my list at 23 of the decade, The Force Awakens. And no other movies made my top 52 in the franchise.
The whole franchise.
Wow.
All right.
I'm crying on the my number 23.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm just being honest. Yeah.
My number 23 is Her, 2013. Adored that movie. And actually, this is one of the ones where I looked at it and I thought, I'm so sad it's not higher. But it did make my 25 of the decade.
Number 52 on my list.
Oh,
that's a good one.
It was the last that I included into the pool.
That's it's way up on my list, but it's not. It didn't end up making my top 25.
Got it.
For my spot 23, it ended up being Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, which I found to be an incredibly affecting film. And certainly a year I thought the Oscars did get it right, despite all the mix-ups that took place. It's just a wonderful film. So that's my 23.
Oh, Andy, you didn't get the note that 23 was supposed to be a sci-fi film because I also have a sci-fi film on this one. This was there were potentially two from this director on my list, and I tried to not duplicate. I was trying to not weight it too heavily, and out of the two, this one it just struck me a lot more. And I think it's perhaps because I saw it in the theater versus the other one I saw, sort of like on my television streaming first. But for 23, I went with probably one of the most oddly moving films that I didn't expect to hit me in the gut the way it did, and that is Annihilation with Natalie Portman, which was just a really powerful movie for me. So I don't think it made a lot of people's list, but for me, it really showed, a potential of this director, Alex Garland, moving forward, and I'm continuing to expect great things from him in really unique and powerful storytelling.
I haven't seen it, but I haven't decided yet if I want to just go watch it or I want to read the books first, because the books I've heard are very interesting in a very different way, right?
Yeah.
So, but I tend to the energy to see to read the book if I've seen the movie doesn't exist for me. So that's why I've kind of been holding off on it. Also, Andy, I would say that Moonlight for me, I mean, it's undeniable. No one sort of commented on that, but undeniable how effective that movie was, how remarkable remarkable it was. It didn't make my list, though, because personally I didn't find it effective.
Sure.
And I bring that up in a great irony because my 22 is Inside Out. Right? So we go from a best film that has this huge resonance for everyone in the world, but this kind of gets to the, your definition of MVP here. This Inside Out from Pixar was a really special and life-changing, like philosophy-changing movie for me. I cannot get through it without being deeply emotionally affected and figuring out how to sort of list my emotions by 5 drivers, I think has been such a powerful thing for me in talking about myself and then also for me relating to my children. So I think, and talking with my children. So that's why Inside Out comes at 22 on my list.
Nice.
My number 22 represents I think one of the greatest falls from greatness, akin to the cliff jumping scene in Midsommar. What starts with a movie that makes my top 25. I don't even know where the second film shows up. It's so far down on my list. It's Kingsman: The Secret Service.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Deeply enjoyed Kingsman. It did very well. Who the hell cares where the second one ends
right.
up?
Yep.
What happened with that?
It'll come up.
Maybe the third one will absolve the sins of that second one. We'll see. Anyway, my 22, I like JJ went with an animated film in a different style, though. This is a film that I think it hit me because the ending turned it into something else that I wasn't expecting at all, and it hit me really hard. It is the Lego Movie. The way that film changes at the end just reset the whole film for me in the most beautiful way. And I wasn't expecting that from a movie about Legos. So that is my number 22.
Number 40 for me. Lego Movie.
Such a good one.
So great.
22. Yeah, Pete, you didn't get the animated movie memo for 22? I mean, come on. This one's probably higher up on your list. But for me, it's a genre that when I'm making my top list, it's a real struggle for me. I'm thinking of, I don't want to say it's not great movies, but I don't know. There's something that, as you know, when we talk about things on the film board, I think about importance and theme and message and all of that stuff. So Lego Movie isn't going to end up on my list, although it was a great fun movie. But for me, a movie that combined animation and fun and really important messages about things like anyone can wear the mask in Into the Spider-Verse is my number 22.
That'll definitely be popping up again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you bring up movies that are on the show, Steve. My 21 was something, we're going to find some things on this list where I'm really thankful for the show. For being a part of the next reel, because my 21 is a movie that I never would have seen, never would have known about. And I think a lot of people still don't. In fact, I shared it with Tommy at one point after we did it on Trailer Rewind, and he saw it afterwards and was really moved by it too. For me, it's Faults.
Oh,
and if people haven't seen it,
my gosh,
I think it is a small film, but it is so remarkable. And it was such a moving thing for me. I don't know if you remember on the day that we did the show, Steve, it was also the day that I took the dissociative experiences scale with my therapist.
Oh, yes. That was quite the day.
And then watched a movie about being brainwashed by a cult.
Yes.
Wow. Was that an interesting anecdote in TNR history?
Yes.
So it makes for an interesting show if people reach back into the thing, but also that's why it belongs on my top movies of the decade. So Faults at 21 for me.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
That's outstanding. My number 21 represents, I think, one of those times that are becoming less rare, where I see a movie and then I do a show on it and realize by default, this movie has just become a guilty pleasure of mine. Who knew? I'm talking about 2018's First Man.
Oh,
wow.
Really? Wow. Didn't make my list.
Nope.
Surprising no one.
No one?
No.
I was on the scale with you, Pete. I thought it was a pretty enjoyable film. It was not in my top list, but I still found it to be a lot more enjoyable than everyone else who you talked to about it on the show.
It's like I saw a different movie.
My 21 it was a small film that came out. It was another 2019 film. That came out and kind of came and went, but it was an incredibly affecting film for me. it was like the modern day Fight Club. It was about masculinity and just about kind of being in group, and just there was so much going on in it. It was Riley Stearns' The Art of Self-Defense, and that film it worked so well for me. And I wish that it got seen by more people, but it's definitely a film that I think is worth checking out, because it's saying quite a bit. So that's my spot 21.
Viggo Mortensen, is that right?
No, it's Jesse Eisenberg.
Oh yes. Okay, thank you.
It
Yeah,
ended
I
up
didn't
in
see
my
it.
in my 30s. It's so good, and I don't know. I feel like that's one of those movies that's going to keep getting better. Like Fight Club. Every time I see it, it's
Definitely.
better.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, that's hilarious. I mean, that's really funny because Riley Stearns also wrote Faults. So we got that. Yeah, right. Yes. So there we go. But I'm doing one that was also one on the show, and JJ, a trailer rewind for me that really moved me because it really talked about the relationship between a father and child, in just a really powerful movie from a filmmaker that's going to show up actually again on my list, and that is Leave No Trace. Which is one that just set up, one of our many trailer rewind movies set up in the Portland area that we talked about this year, but one in which horses don't get hit by cars.
Oh, jeez.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
That was the one I missed. I still have to check that one out.
You have not
Didn't
seen
make
Leave
my
No
list.
Trace? Oh,
But I have seen it on other lists as I was gathering for this. It's an interesting movie. So if you haven't seen it, you should.
And I think at this point we've done our 25 through 21.
Yes.
Are we taking a pause here, Steve, for something? Were you stopping every 5?
Yeah, just to sort of reflect on some of the key sort of, I don't know if I want to say innovations, trends, sort of things that happened in the decade. And one of the first things I wanted to talk about was the way we watch movies and how that's changed. Because if you look back, Netflix streaming really didn't go international till 2010. I think in the States it started around 2007, but most people were watching stuff on disc still back then. Hulu launched what it would call the Hulu Plus, which is when they actually started the network shows, sort of being there the next day back in November of 2010. So when we were, a decade ago, we were pretty much still going to Blockbuster. And I just was wondering how your watching movies has changed. If you think back over the decade, how much do you rely on streaming? How much do you depend on, how many of you are still getting DVDs by mail?
I am.
That's yeah. That's
well,
really,
I know. Andy's got a special Laserdisc of the Month Club still going. I know that.
When I went through grad school, and one of the things that I did while I was studying was rip my personal collection of DVDs, and that was in the early aughts.
Okay.
And so I was ripping them at like 320 by 180.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
that was like the best I could. Or as soon as I could get storage enough, I'd actually rip them at the correct resolution of DVD. So I was already trying to get as much digital as I could, watching movies on my first iPod video.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was terrible,
iPod,
but
wow.
I wanted it. So the what you describe is like, oh God, that's right. Those were the days where the world caught up to my home ripping.
Started to, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when we, I don't know the exact year we cut cable. It was probably maybe 2011, 2012. But, Hulu, just the interface was really clunky, hard to find things. My wife was really not happy. Like, how can I find my shows? But it really began that transition to solely streaming of, instead of media being pushed at us, but I'm going to go find it and watch it when I want to watch it. But the other piece was, that's the death of Blockbuster as well. And if you haven't read the book Netflix, I highly recommend it, because it is a really compelling read about the battle between Netflix and Blockbuster, and the smart moves that Netflix makes, and the really awkward moves and dumb moves that Blockbuster makes in an attempt to try to defeat Netflix, that ends up actually, imploding. Yeah.
Killing it. Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing that's suffered the most, sadly, with the whole streaming thing is a lot of older projects, older films. Because, I mean, and I think I'm blanking on his name. What's the screenwriter that I always suffer through? Who?
John August.
John August, thank you. Who, I mean, I will say he was really championing, all of this because so many streaming services, like he was looking for, I think, wasn't it the Flamingo Kid from the 80s?
Yeah,
and
Flamingo
couldn't
Kid.
find it. And he was like, what is going on? We have all this access to stuff via streaming, but nobody is putting any of this old stuff out there. And that's still a huge issue. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm still such a fan of physical media, because there are a lot of specialty houses now that are just the places that are releasing a lot of older material that you're just not getting through the streaming services. And I don't know if the streaming services are interested in catching up. And that's the frustrating thing. And so that is largely why I keep my disc subscription with Netflix, why I'm still checking stuff out from the library all the time, because there is so much content out there that is just not being moved up to streaming. And I think that is sadly going to be one of the biggest things that's going to hurt the film viewing industry as we move forward, because people like my kids, they're growing up just streaming everything, and they aren't going to have the interest in seeking older material out if they can't get it that way. And I think that's really going to hurt.
It's the illusion of complete access, right? And that because you have that illusion, you believe that that's true, which I think is concerning, not just in terms of the old ones. The old ones are the place where the biggest gaps are. But when you have new movies there's going to be a movie on my list here, and I'll talk about it when we get there, that you can't get right now. Unless you go to the library or something like that. And it's within the last decade. And of course, unless you think about it and go search for it, how would you know? Because you have that illusion that everything's there. And I think that's really interesting.
No, it's a really valid point, and it's one of my favorite films from I think it's 1999, because it was 20 years later. Drop Dead Gorgeous was finally available on Hulu this year, and I had been trying to find it for years, and you had to try and find a used DVD on eBay, and those were going for like $80. And even the director said, I don't think I have a copy of this movie. And it's one of the issues of movies that are picked up by maybe, smaller distributors that then, go under. And then it's a question of, well, who owns the rights, and negotiating those and figuring those out for streaming services. It again becomes the question of, is it worth the work to try to, figure this stuff out? Is there a high enough demand? And, fortunately a great movie like Drop Dead Gorgeous has enough, recognizable names in it now that it's like, well, yeah, people will show up for this. But smaller films that are forgotten, like The Flamingo Kid, it's a Matt Damon or Matt Dillon vehicle from the mid 80s. I don't know that it's, a classic, but yeah, that people have fond memories of it, but I don't know that that's enough incentive for studios to try to negotiate and figure out all the rights issues to get these things to streaming. So yeah, it is a valid concern of films disappearing. I know there were similar things that, with the transition to DVD format, what movies were going to be available. And it's always the possibility that there's films that are going to be sort of lost or forgotten to the ages, which is, as you say, it creates the illusion that everything's available, but really it is another filter for us.
But The Flamingo Kid is available through one of the specialty Blu-ray houses. So there you go.
And Better Off Dead is available in full on YouTube. So anyway, are we jumping back in?
Yeah, let's jump back in.
Number 20 for me is a film board movie, and I think something that was really a remarkable turn in the comic book movie world. I don't know if it was the one that started the turn, but it was definitely something that was remarkable for it. It's Logan for me at number 20. Something that's, again, I think super remarkable of the way that the films have changed over the decade.
That'll certainly pop up again.
It turns out I think it's more remarkable than that. Fancy that. That's amazing. My number 20 is one that I didn't know I was as excited about as I was, but the fact that it came out and did so well and did, I think, fantastic justice to some old characters that I love, or certainly an old franchise, that is Creed 2015.
Cool. Yeah.
Really did well.
Yeah, didn't make my list, but it's a great movie.
Yeah.
That is, it's a great movie. one we talked about this past year on our show in our Rocky series. So fantastic movie. Glad to see it pop up here. It's not on mine either, but it definitely warrants discussion. For my number 20, I am jumping back into the animated realm with a film that I think was, for considering how much it's enjoying love of things from the past, it was one of the most fresh Disney movies that I've seen in ages. And I think it's just one of their best films that they've released. It is
Tangled.
I like Tangled.
Frozen 2.
Back off, man.
No,
Hold off Summer Adventure.
Oh, talk about bottom lists.
Sorry, you were saying?
It is Wreck-It Ralph, a movie that follows the villain of a game as he's journeying to become the hero that he thinks he is. Such a fantastic movie. It is my number 20.
It's funny you mentioned that. I just was driving down the street the other day and pulled up next to a truck, and it's a guy who has his own business, I assume, and it's Felix's Fix-It service.
Hey,
I just thought,
I love
that. That's fun.
and I thought that guy knows how to brand himself. There we go. No Disney, copyright infringement. He just apparently his name's Felix, and he said, "I'm going to use this to my advantage."
So we can call him up and say, "Fix it, Felix."
That's right.
That's right.
This is the first occurrence of something. Wreck-It Ralph isn't, but this is the first occurrence of something for me where I didn't find it as I was gathering movies for it, but it belongs somewhere on the list for me, is the original Frozen movie. I didn't find it when I was gathering. I don't know where it would place in all of my list, but that's a really special movie for me, and I didn't find it as I was gathering my list.
Yeah, as you guys are mentioning things, and I'm like, would that have made my list? I don't know, but I know I have gaps in my list. That there's things that, because I've used Flickchart, I used Letterboxd, and there may have been stuff for whatever reason that I forgot to log in there, and I jumbled some things around a little bit. But for my number 20, I went with a film that, again, this is probably going to be a theme. You're going to see a lot of similar types of movies like this, because to me, they're just really emotionally powerful movies that just, I think, are really worth seeing, and I think get often forgotten by a lot of the, I don't know, more noticeable. For whatever reason, but this is a film that just everybody needs to go see because it is such a powerful experience, and that is Taylor Sheridan's Wind River, with Jeremy Renner and there's it's so good. He's a writer that I think you'll be hearing from him again later in my list. Yeah,
very cool. I haven't seen that, so didn't make us. I believe what you guys are saying. I don't know that I have a reason to see the movie based on the story, but from what you're saying about the way it's made, I'm pretty sure I will want to see stuff that person has done in the future. Number 19 for me is the first of the comic book, well, first of the I guess the MCU that's on the list for me, because Logan was my last one, but this is Guardians of the Galaxy number 2. I was really moved by the second one. One of the sort of qualifiers for my list here is if I saw it more than once in the theater, it's kind of a big deal to me because I don't do that. It's just not my style. I think I saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2 3 times in the theater. It moved me in ways I didn't expect. It took all of the great talent of cueing music from the first one and put it on hyperdrive for me. It was a perfect soundtrack to a really powerful movie, and it was number 19.
My next pick is a movie that I deeply enjoyed talking about 16 minutes ago, and that is Room.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Such a great movie. My number 19, I have a lot of 2019 films kind of hitting this area. This is one that Bong Joon-ho did this year. We all have, well, I don't know if JJ has seen it, but Parasite is way up here for me, and that's my Bong Joon-ho representative film. I did cut one of his other ones out, but that's the one I picked, number 19, Parasite.
It's awesome, and we tried to see it, I think, multiple times for the film board, but its phased release made that impossible. I still do really want to see it, but I have not.
Okay, this one I had trouble picking. There are 2 from this director that came out in this decade, and I didn't want to put both of them on here. I felt like I had to pick one, and again, both of them belong on this list. But I think because of the story to Begin Again, I think, put it slightly above Sing Street on this list, because I think just Mark Ruffalo's character and the transformation his character goes through, to me, I think just spoke to me a little bit more than in Sing Street. But both of them belong on this list. But I went with Begin Again, and if you have not seen either of these films, your heart has a huge gaping void in it, because these things fill your heart in some way that is indescribable when it comes to just writing powerful stories and great music together. So I'm going with Begin Again.
I guess my heart has a hole in it.
You haven't seen either?
I've seen Sing Street. I just haven't seen.
I'm going to call my cardiologist after this list.
Oh my gosh!
You guys, the band scene when he builds it is amazing.
Yes.
It's so good.
Begin Again. That's what it's called?
Yes.
Begin Again.
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo, Keira Knightley. Oh my gosh.
That's all fun.
And,
I like all those things.
And what's his name? Late night with what's his name?
James Corden. And
James Corden is a street singer.
And Haley Steinfeld.
Fun.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. So
check it out.
So good. Yes.
Awesome. My number 18 is a film board movie that took me by surprise. Was it a film board? Yes. In other words, you guys did it, I think, before I joined the show, and I did it. I went back and watched it in review as I started becoming part of the show, and it blew my mind so much that I actually wrote a blog post back when we were doing that about it. Number 18 for me is Fury.
Oh
yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
It meant a lot to me on many different levels, in a very subjective, that's not the right word for it, but in a very layered way. And I think it hasn't had the resonance for everyone, but for me, it's a really special movie.
That's a great pick, and it's one of those that I feel like in my shuffles it was on my list, and I don't know where it is right now, but it's in there. It's in there.
Cool.
All right, Fury takes us to another repeat for me. Edge of Tomorrow hits my number 18.
That's a good one.
Okay.
And my number 18 is also another repeat. I'm just going to say with this one, with Logan, if you haven't watched the noir version and you're a fan of it, check it out, because it fits really nicely with that movie. So Logan, number 18 for me.
Okay. Number 18 for me, this was one I struggled, because it's one I saw once, and it's not what I'm looking forward to watching again, but it was just a really powerful experience watching it. It was nominated for Best Picture. It has some just stellar performances. I don't know that it's a film for everybody, but it's one that I just really think is one that should not be forgotten from this decade, and that is P.T. Anderson's Phantom Thread.
Oh, cool.
Boy, that's probably in my bottom 100.
Oh, it's just,
boy, did I hate that.
For me, it just worked so well. It just works on multiple levels and just has so many things to say.
Well, I have seen.
I'm already noticing the change in how great it is to see. I'm taking these lists and putting them side by side, and how great it is that I'm feeling less obligation to put certain movies on my list, mostly because Steve has put them on his.
Well, and
Phantom Thread is not actually one of those. I didn't hate it like Andy did, but it didn't work for me like it did. For
Steve,
so,
I haven't seen. I have seen it on other best lists, so that's the other thing. It may be I haven't seen it, so it might be a movie that is resonates with some and not with all, which I think is interesting. My next movie is very much like that too, and that's number 17 for me, with an exclamation mark. Mother. By Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is not a movie for everyone, but I really love Aronofsky, and it totally jibed with me. If you haven't seen it, don't get spoiled. Don't read the IMDb page.
No.
Check it out, because it's an interesting poem, and deserves some real thought, and it is a moving movie, but be prepared, because it's way crazy intense.
And there's there's one moment that turned a lot of people off. I will say it was a very brutal moment.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
really interesting movie. Pete?
Pete.
Yep. Oh, is it me? Oh, God. It's like I'm bored of myself, because I've got a whole string of repeats right now. But then this one pops up, and I'm actually surprised I'm the first person to enter it onto the list, and that is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, that's coming later.
That'll be later. My number 17, it's the third of my animated films on my list, and this one I wasn't expecting to like at all. We actually just talked about it on last week's SatMap because I ended up loving it so much. It is Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs, which totally took me by surprise. And it shot up there so fast on my list of Wes Anderson favorites, just so completely unexpected because I saw the trailer and I was like, that looks ridiculous. And I don't know what I was thinking because it's one of my favorites, Isle of Dogs, number 17.
I'm so glad.
It's so good.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. 17. This, I felt like I wanted this one to be higher, but because it's just flat out fun. And of the franchises that had a trilogy in this decade, this is my top trilogy because it's just bonkers fun. And this, when I first saw this movie, I think the comment, and I don't remember who said it, where I read it, but it said, this is the greatest comic book adaptation of source material that isn't actually a comic book, and that is 2014's John Wick. The whole trilogy for me just really is just ridiculous fun. But 2014, I think, just is a pivotal point when this movie comes out of really redefining the action movie and taking it in a new direction. Brilliant world creating, an iconic character that they have, to me, just done such a great job of developing the universe, the story. There were rumors that Netflix was developing a series on the Hotel, the Continental. I'm still waiting for that to happen because I would love to just spend more time in this universe.
That's a good one. Didn't end up making my list, but what a great movie.
I'm regretting that, but again, it's one of those that Steve got it. So
I thought for sure, Pete, it was going to be in here somewhere.
I know. You know what, Steve? I'm looking at my list. I'm like, how did that miss my
Steve,
list? It absolutely should have.
Pete said, you know what? But the stunts weren't there. It didn't even get a nomination for the third one.
It didn't make my list. Who's going to be the custodian or the patron of Tommy's list?
Oh, I guess I can just jump in. It's one that's already been repeated. And again, this is just alphabetical for Tommy. It is Annihilation.
That is on brand.
Right. Annihilation is what we will throw out from him right here, which makes sense for him.
For my number 16, it is a movie from 2019, and it isn't my top listed movie from 2019 on this list, but it is my favorite movie from last year. And I don't know how that works logically or to reconcile in my brain. But for me, it's Booksmart, which I think is actually, as people go back and see, I think it's going to have more and more resonance for people as a special movie. And I think it belongs in the best of the decade list.
Mine is a repeat, but I want to call it out specifically and a little bit more slowly because of what it represented for me, and that is this is a movie that I think it finally cemented my transformation from someone who didn't like horror to someone who deeply appreciated what this movie did in horror for me, and that is once again Midsommar. That was a crazy impactful movie for me. I got so much out of it I'm very surprised that it made my top 25. I would not have ever predicted that a movie like this would have done that, let alone at number 16.
That is awesome.
For a decade.
It's awesome.
Ugh.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that to pop
good.
up on anyone else's list, so I'm thrilled to see it do so.
Yeah.
All right. That leaves me number 16. This is one that I really am not going to be surprised if it pops up for potentially all of you, much higher on your lists. But it is my Edgar Wright entry, and it is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I just thought was such a clever film. I had such a great time with it. So number 16 for me.
Number 30 on my list.
Yeah, I'm glad you have it on your list, Andy. Because that's one I was like, I don't know where to put this. And again, it's fun, but I always go for something that I'm going for. Yeah, something different in my list. But thank you, because that is definitely one worth remembering from this decade. Is that to me then with my number 16?
That's you. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
JJ, hit another trailer rewind with this one. And I think it's one that both of us were surprised by how strong this movie is and not getting the recognition it deserved. And it's one that I think just really speaks to what was going on in this decade. Amazing performances, just all around, and that is 2016's Miss Sloane with Jessica Chastain in a stellar performance. A great movie that when people ask, well, what's a movie that you guys talked about on the show that I might not have seen, I will always point them to this one because I'm like, you have to see this movie. I do not want to tell you anything about it because of the twists in the story. Just go in and watch it and just be blown away by this movie.
That's exactly what that movie is for me, and it shows up on my list coming up too.
That's one I really wanted to get on my list. I just couldn't find a way to squeeze it in anywhere, but it's just below the top 25. And I think it's also because of you guys. So
nice.
Thank you.
What's Tommy's number B?
Tommy's number B. Next entry is The Babadook, which is definitely an interesting horror movie. Didn't work for me, but clearly it worked for Tommy.
Cool.
And that puts us through 16. Steve, what are we going to chat about now?
Well, what I wanted to talk about is, and this comes off of Miss Sloane and Jessica Chastain, because I think, who was it that had Zero Dark 30 on their list?
Number 25.
But I think, looking at stars that were sort of on the rise that hit, that, came out of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but really peaked and are just went really solid this decade. You think of, actresses like, Jessica Chastain. Also, Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is an interesting one to look at in this decade because 2012, we had like the Hunger Games. I mean, this is a woman who was making ridiculous amounts of money she was the highest paid actress in 2015 and 2016. Where is she now? What's going on? We had Passengers. We had, what was the their spy one, Red Sparrow, right? Or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mother.
And Mother.
Well, let's not forget this year's Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
so you can call a lame duck movie, right? As it leaves one studio and onto another.
Yeah, exactly. But what are other looking back on your list? There are other actors or performers that you feel like really had a solid decade. I'm thinking of like Leonardo DiCaprio, sort of has really reinvented himself.
I was thinking about this last night, actually, very specifically because of the movie that I watched last night, which was The Report and Adam Driver. And I'm like, this is a guy. I mean, his first feature film was 2011.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
Everybody, I mean, he had started working on other stuff in 2009, but seriously, his career is this past decade. He really turned into something huge and just exploded. And it's just, 2019 he had 4 films that he was in, and from big ones like Rise of Skywalker to Oscar bait, I guess you could say, Marriage Story, The Report, and then to kind of indie fare like The Dead Don't Die. So he's all over the place with what he's doing, and I'm just endlessly impressed with the work of Adam Driver.
There was
I would throw Amy Adams on that list. She's somebody I was thinking about a lot, who ended up doing on kind of a roller coaster of small films to big films, like as playing Lois in Batman v Superman, so the DC stuff, to incredible movies like Nocturnal Animals that I'm only just now regretting that I didn't end up. It's lower on my list than it probably should have been. To frankly, taking big name actors who take these performances on sort of the big feature series on Netflix, Hulu, whatever. She did Sharp Objects adaptation, which was some incredible work. So that's another one of those interesting trends. These actors who sort of blow up and take big series. Big Little Lies, for example, is another one that puts a lot of big names in a series. Yeah, right.
For me, I had a couple different ones that I thought about, but the one that I think deserves the most attention from that in my mind is Margot Robbie. What she has done over the last decade is just truly remarkable. And she's going to show up a couple places on my list.
I'm sure,
just in one way, but she not only makes movies, she funds movies now. She propels creative ideas through Hollywood. And there are a lot of actors that do this. I don't want to, put it on her, but the stuff that she's making, I just have so much reverence for. And I think she is making waves in the way that I want for every creative person in Hollywood to be able to do. I admire the ways that she approaches films. And I think so many of her films are really special over the last decade. So
Yeah, that is one. Going back to the Adam Driver, this was something that sort of hit or caught attention on the internet, was just the list of directors that he has worked with in this decade, because he has worked with Martin Scorsese, Coen Brothers, Noah Baumbach, Jim Jarmusch, Clint Eastwood, Spike Lee, Steven Spielberg, Steven Soderbergh, and Terry Gilliam. I mean, within 1 decade.
Yeah.
This guy has, you want to look at a career, that's the guy right there who's worked with, stellar directors in this decade. So but you guys mentioned some great ones. Margot Robbie, I think somebody I know just watched the time travel movie about time. She's got a small part in that, and then to now basically like shepherding like a good chunk of the DC cinematic universe with Birds of Prey and all that.
Busts out and gets Disney to make his own Kylo Ren movie, I'll say he's as good as Margot Robbie. But until that time, Margot Robbie. For me. No, I love Adam Driver. I'm just trying to get rid of your mansplaining with Kylo here.
No. Yes.
I'm just joking. So,
all right.
Number 15 for me. As already been mentioned, it totally blew my mind. I was almost off the horse with comic book movies going into this one. I didn't want to see it. We picked it for the Marvel for the film board to do a Marvel movie. I went in and it totally blew my mind. Saw it in RPX with the rumble seats, and it was a life changer for me. And that's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Very good.
What would my top 25 list be without a zombie film? That is 2013's World War Z.
Nice.
I adored that movie. Come on.
What's great about that is it's a great film, and it's based on a great book, and they're two totally different animals.
Completely.
Very different animals. That's a great point.
All right. My number 15 was a movie we talked about on the show this past year in a series that I think some people tired of because it was so repetitive, but I can not
Robin
believe
Hood Men in Tights.
I cannot believe how great Bradley Cooper's version of A Star Is Born was.
Yeah.
What a film. That's my number 15.
I want to talk about gaps. That is a movie that's made for me, and I still haven't seen it.
Oh my gosh.
I
desperately need to see it. Like, the music is great. Like, I get teared up, and I still haven't even seen the movie yet. Like, I need to do it, but it's a gap for me.
Do it.
Yes.
Do it.
I still haven't gotten around to because I buy my things digitally, as I always say, and Apple has thrown in the Encore edition there into the extras, and I have not gotten around to see that the version with extra footage yet. So I'm curious to see what an extra song, a couple scenes or two might do to either just make it feel longer or if it is adding a little bit to it. But it's one that I'm looking forward to getting around to in the coming year. All right, so is it to me for number 15? Yep. Okay, so I mentioned Taylor Sheridan, his film Wind River, and I said he'd be showing up on the list again. This was another one that he wrote, and I try not to overload with too much Taylor Sheridan on my list because there's so much that he did in this decade. So I'm going with one that caught me off guard and just... such a great story. And again, I think very much of the era of two brothers resorting to a desperate scheme trying to save their ranch in 2016's Hell or High Water with Chris Pine, Ben Foster, Jeff Bridges. Just a really, to me, just great story. And again, very much, I think, of this decade and, dealing with banks and, mortgages and paying off and being in debt and trying to get out from under that. And, really, are these guys bad guys or are they just guys that, this system's taken advantage of? And it's just, to me, a really, really powerful film.
You know me, I love some Ben Foster. He was number 46 on my list with Hell or High Water.
And Tommy, for spot 15, we have Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Didn't make my list. I like that movie a lot, but it didn't make it in the big group for me. I think it's a really interesting movie, too. I saw it on a flight from Sweden back here to the U.S., so. Number 14 for me, back to 2019. I think these are the two. This is the last 2019 movie for me, but it has to be, I think, talked about for how remarkable it is to bring the franchise together. Avengers Endgame is number 14 for me on this list.
That'll certainly be popping up again.
Okay.
That will pop up again, yeah. For me, number 14, in the spirit of literally directly one-upping Andy, A Star's Born.
I love it. That's perfect. All right, my number 14. This was a movie that I saw in theaters. I'm like, everybody needs to see this movie because it's so great. And then you guys covered it on Trailer Rewind. It's just, to me, just a fantastic road trip movie. It is Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yay.
Oh, yes. That'll be coming again later.
Number 39 for me.
All right. We're getting into a segment of films where I started my fondness for certain types of films that everybody sort of knows is in my wheelhouse. We're going to hit, and I had to filter because I was like, I'm overloading this on movies about teenagers. I gotta filter this. I gotta cut something out.
Steve.
So there's a couple that my favorites that I just love, but in terms of I think true greatness, they're fun movies, but I had to go with ones that I think just really are going to endure and stand. And I'm going to start off with the just tremendously powerful mother-daughter relationship in 2017's Lady Bird, which just again, just I think Greta Gerwig again. Everybody's talking about her Little Women. This Christmas, I think I haven't seen Frances Ha with her in that, but to me, writing and directing this and just spoke so truly to the complexities of the mother-daughter relationship, and it's one that I think is going to stand up to time. So, all
right, jumping over to JJ's list. Also, I should just read this from him.
Tommy's list.
Tommy's list. Sorry, I'm not willing to say these are the best movies of the decade, but these are the ones that made the biggest impact on me.
Okay.
So, just wanted to make sure I cleared that up.
Okay.
His next one on his list is Birdman.
Oh,
interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely is worth
I think that's the greatest film board fail we had. I think that was one where we talked about it, and we said, no, it's not opening wide. Let's go with something else. And then it became the thing. Yeah.
We have others. Yeah. I don't remember what we chose instead of Wonder Woman, but yes, Birdman we should have chose too. Not my favorite movie from that year, though, and that's always the thing that frustrated me there. Whiplash was definitely my favorite movie of that year. And I think a lot of things were overshadowed that year by Birdman. So I am a little bit bitter about it. It didn't make my list. Number 13 for me has already been mentioned, but I think it's great. Is it Matthew Schwartz, the director of Kingsman? Is that right?
No, Matthew Vaughn.
Matthew Vaughn, excuse me, Matthew Vaughn. Yeah, I like pretty much everything he did with the X-Men franchise, and I think I love that Kingsman is on other people's lists. That first movie was remarkable for me when I went out and saw it.
Excellent. All right, Pete, 13.
My number 13 is a movie that I saw with Steve and Andy in Arizona, and it surprised me so much. I'm talking about 2018's Eighth Grade.
Ah, what a movie. Cool. Haven't been able to finish it. It's still working for me.
Neither has my family.
Oh.
Yeah,
I'm much chagrined that my wife and daughter tried to watch it and we're too broken up to even get through the third act. And I didn't even see the same movie that they did. I adored this.
I'm your other daughter, but yes,
yeah,
it is a great one. It didn't make my list, but now I'm like, maybe it should have. My number 13, though, is one that I think everybody talked about, how it was just one that would make every grown-up cry because it was so touching at the end. The conclusion of a trilogy that turned into a quadrilogy. It is another 2010 film. It is Toy Story 3.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have put that on my list, but wow.
No.
I shake like a freaking leaf in that movie with tears. It is super intense.
They did what they knew what they were doing with that one.
Yes, they did. All right, 13 is a movie that did make this adult cry, and Pete, I am right there with you. Eighth Grade. That is right there. That is a movie that devastating and powerful. Yeah. And again, talent that I'm dying to see where Bo Burnham goes with this. Yep. I think Elsie Fisher, see what project she chooses, because she just is amazing carrying this film, and it's one that people need to make time to go see. But it is a emotional train wreck on the backside of that. It was rough, but thank you. It was on that one. Yes.
Yeah, it was great.
Next for Tommy is Black Swan. Another
Interesting.
Aronofsky.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
did not
Okay.
make my list, but it's a very, very
Not mine either,
remarkable movie too.
All right.
Did not even come close to my list.
12, got it. Noted. 12 for me. Here we can see my face again. 12 for me is that movie that I was talking about. So it's the last of the animated movies for me on my list. And you cannot find movies on streaming services or anywhere available right now for this company. And I don't know if it's just a contract dispute or what, but it's Paranorman from Laika. Paranorman, I think, is a exceedingly complex movie that lots of people don't see because it is animated. And I love the music. I love pretty much everything about that movie. And it's zombie related. It's the kind of things that I don't really like from movies, but that is, I love it. And I can't find it anywhere. So what's Phil Knight's son's name, who's the acting or former CEO
Steve?
of Laika?
Steve? No.
Yeah, if he could just get in with the streaming companies and work out a deal here, it would help me quite a bit. Paranorman, my number 12.
Such a great movie.
My number 12 is another one that surprised me. It took me years and years to see this. I only saw it last year, 2 years ago, I think. Maybe a little bit longer, but it came out in 2011, and it is, I don't know why I'm surprised, because I'm such a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and all of the things that Joss Whedon has done at his 2011's Cabin in the Woods.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. Nice.
All right.
My number 12, this is my Star Wars entry for my list, and it's the one that I don't know, a lot of people hate, but I just love it. It's Star Wars The Last Jedi.
The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, you.
Sorry.
I think that what Rian Johnson did in that film was just top notch, and I'm just endlessly impressed with choices that were made. Even though I do have quibbles, but still, it's to me, it is so representative of what great things you could do with that franchise.
Yep.
Gravity bombs in space did not make my list.
All right. Jeez, are we going there? All right. No, I'm redirecting this conversation. Redirecting this conversation to I guess the final in my teen trilogy, right here in the mid range of this, back in 2014 when Richard Linklater said, "Hey, surprise everybody! I've been working on this movie for the past 12 years," and it was one that it just hit at the right time. My oldest daughter, the age that she was at, this was one that was a struggle to decide, do I let her watch this R-rated movie? And I thought, no, this was something that we sat down, we watched. She really, really, connected with this one. And it's one of these unique achievements from a director that I don't know that anyone will attempt to repeat, but staked a lot on this. And to me, it just worked out to a really powerful film that I think is deserving of being remembered. And yes, it is nearly 3 hours, but it is 3 hours that goes by so quickly, watching Mason and his relationship with his parents.
And that's Boyhood, right?
And the title is
Boyhood. Sorry, Boyhood. That's Boyhood. Yes.
Not that we didn't know.
Yeah. I'm really happy that's on your list too. It didn't make my list. It was kind of a grueling watch for me, but I'm really happy it made the list for you. It's definitely on a lot of other people's decade lists too. I've seen.
It's one of those where the work itself deserves to be noted.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Number 12 for Tommy is Bridesmaids.
Yay.
Oh,
Bridesmaids was on my list too. I actually own it, and that's very rare for me with a comedy. Bridesmaids was number 38 on my list. Next for me at number 11 is this the top comic book movie for me? Yeah, so this is the highest ranked comic book movie of the decade for me, which I think is meaningful because I care so much about comics, but that's Deadpool. Deadpool was it changed the game, as one would say. People didn't think you could do that kind of thing with a comic book movie. It reminds me of the fact that now we have video games that are adult video games. Deadpool made comic book movies adult comic book movies, and I think it's fantastically entertaining, and I think it definitely belongs in a spot for the decade at 11 for me.
Nice.
My number 11 is already been on there, I think only once, and that is Steve much earlier in the show, which is Annihilation 2018.
It was on Tommy's
Tommy had
list
it.
too. Yep.
Okay.
It was not.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you're right. It was Tommy's. It was in Tommy's A's.
My number 11, I guarantee will be on one other person's list. I'll leave it secret, but I'm pretty sure.
Are we playing this game again, Andy? Is that what we're doing?
Here we go.
This movie really affected me. It's such a moving film and such a beautiful story. It is, and it wasn't at all what I was expecting when I walked into The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. What a movie that is. I just love it endlessly. So that is number 11 on my list.
It didn't make mine, but I love it too. I hear the sigh.
Steve?
All right.
Okay. All right.
Steve.
JJ, we got lucky with a lot of our trailer rewind picks. And I know this is probably,
It's a good show.
I think I'm hoping this one's a little bit higher on your list because I think it is, but it's one that I'd seen and then I said, we need to do this on the trailer rewind. And you said yes. And every time I watch it, I am just totally impressed with this movie. And it's never what you expect. And again, you mentioned Margot Robbie, but I, Tanya, to me, it did something really interesting with, we're going to tackle telling someone's story. We're going to do it in a unique way. It's a crazy story to tell. And I think the only casualty from this movie that I'm experiencing right now is I'm seeing the trailers for Clint Eastwood's newest film.
Sure.
And
Richard
I'm like,
Jewell.
yes, Richard Jewell. I'm like, this poor guy, he did such a great job of playing just the ridiculous, goofy, bodyguard who has no clue. And I can't help but see it. I'm like, no, I'm like, he's not a security guard at the Olympics. He can't be. And it's just, he nailed it so well. I mean, there's Sebastian Stan, Allison Janney. I mean, this cast is amazing. And it's one that was not what I expected. And I think that's why it's so high on my list, because it just blew my expectations away. And it continues to be such a great film every single time I see it.
It'll be on mine too.
Yeah.
All right. Number 11 on Tommy's is, Pete already brought it up, Cabin in the Woods.
All right.
Very good.
Oh, look at that.
All right. We are done with our 11 through 25. So, Steve, take it away.
This was a tough topic for me to. It pains my heart. With this filmmaker who is so much a part of our childhood, and I'm looking at this past decade and started it off with The Adventures of Tintin. But if you look at what Spielberg did this decade, he is, to me, in my opinion, he has moved on and is not making the movies for kids anymore. I really enjoyed Adventures of Tintin, but if you look at everything else he did this decade, I think he's made a solid pivot to really telling really solid historical movies. But I feel like this is the decade where Spielberg grew up and wanted to tell different stories, because if you look at where he went, it was Adventures of Tintin, which I had a great time with. War Horse, didn't see at all. Lincoln, Bridge of Spies. Then we get the BFG, which I think underwhelmed. I haven't even bothered seeing it yet. Then we got The Post, Ready Player One, which was fun, but a little bit disappointing. And then, next, we know his next one. I know Andy's so looking forward to West Side Story. But if you look, I mean, really, there's two movies that I think are for kids, Adventures of Tintin and BFG. And that's it within a decade from Spielberg.
I'd say Ready Player One.
Well, yeah, okay, Ready Player One. So it's three. But to me, I think his more solid films are the historical dramas or political dramas.
Even though you haven't seen one of them.
Yeah, okay, well, okay, how is the BFG, Andy?
The War Horse. I'm saying the adult ones.
The adult ones, yes. But
War Horse was a really interesting movie. I mean, it definitely...
what? How do you guys feel about sort of this pivot that Spielberg has taken?
Well, I feel like he's been doing the pivot for several decades now. But I think you're right. This is the decade where I think it's more of that, because I mean, last in the aughts he had, it may have only been Munich. As I kind of look at his list, that was the only one that really stands out as kind of the more adult fare And in the 90s, like Amistad, Schindler's List. But he definitely seems to be making that pivot right now. And so I'm curious what the 2020s will bring. Because, I don't know. I mean, he's an interesting director, and he certainly has been one who's made a lot of stuff that just people remember. But and it's tricky because you don't end up remembering Spielberg because of his more adult fare. You know, it's all of the kind of the blockbuster stuff. So
well, he launched the blockbuster with Jaws, and it's not. He doesn't do that. I mean, Ready Player One, I think, was trying to be that, but it was a bit of a stumble. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the Spielberg that I wanted. And it seems like now we've got, Disney has sort of taken that over, because I think, what is it, like 80% of the box office is like Disney or something ridiculous like that between all of their properties. Disney owns the blockbuster now between Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar and all of that. And it's left Spielberg, and I don't know that he cares. I don't know, but it seems like his heart is more with the historical dramas.
Yeah. And I mean, he at least has one that's announced right now, which is the kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara for sometime soon, which is based on the book by David Kurtzer. I haven't read it, but I know that's he'll be continuing that into the 2020s. So I guess we'll see.
Yes. Yeah, so it's hard for me, it's like who is the Spielberg then for our kids? Like JJ, who's the Spielberg for your kids? If you think about the movie, I mean, we had like, E.T. and you had, those fun
I don't think
family.
So. What I'll say about it is, I think that it's interesting that you bring up that Disney owns the blockbuster now. I think the paradigm has shifted where a director doesn't do it. I mean, we've talked so much about how these like Marvel is changing the game on directors, where they're bringing in these young directors to bring over new franchises where the director doesn't have as much power as the studio does. I think you think of what animated movies were when we were growing up and how Disney controlled that. Now animated movies have a life of their own. I mean, when a family movie comes out on a weekend, it's always in the top 5, right? I mean, because we need programming for families. So I think I think I would bring up studios. Maybe Pixar is the Spielberg for my kids. I don't know if that's the answer, but that's my first inclination.
Interesting.
What's so interesting about that? Like, I'm just thinking about movies that are big that we don't talk about the directors of necessarily. Jake Kasdan did the Jumanji movies, and they're terrific and fun, and the family adores them. And those are like those great comedy adventure movies of their kind of recent memory. And I'm curious to see what happens with guys like Jake, because he's got a lot of career left in him. He's already got properties with a ton of heart under his belt. He also has Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, but that was not in this last decade, so we'll let that go.
Moving on, we ready?
Yeah, so we're jumping into the top 10.
Top 10. Here we go. For me, my top 10. This movie knocked my socks off, too, and I am a big sucker for music cues. We talked about them earlier in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. This is probably... it's close to, but maybe not the best soundtrack for me on the system. I have it on vinyl, 4 sides of eclectic and wonderful music, and then integrated perfectly into the movie. This is Baby Driver for me at number 10, best movie of the decade for me.
Wow. Interesting.
Wow. That is an interesting one to go
big
with.
Disappointment for me.
Andy, you think that's a disappointment? Wait till we get to my number 1 for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm going to use my number 10 as the first of what I'll call the great top 25 list corrective measures for both JJ and Andy, and that is Logan. Should be much higher.
Oh, thank you for that, Pete. That's so great. My number 10 really surprised me from this director, although it shouldn't have, because he's a great director. All I can say at this point is I am really looking forward to talking about this in our series later in 2020, because I think it is Spike Lee's best film. It is BlacKkKlansman.
Oh, cool.
That's a correction I probably should make somewhere. Yeah. No, that's, good. Glad it's there, Andy, because I did not go there. I went with, this is probably because of my cinematic experience seeing this film, because I think we had several films that, we've talked about the difference between seeing it in the theater and that experience, and then seeing it and whether it translates to home viewing. And for me, I have to thank Andy Nelson for getting me D-Box tickets to Mad Max Fury Road, because that movie was already bonkers, but it just made that thing crazy fun. And I think it's a movie that does so many things well, and it's such a surprise, but it's not just a Mad Max movie. I mean, there's so many things going on with Furiosa, and just there's layers to this thing. And then to release it in the black and chrome edition, we talked about Logan Noir, but these are the two films that just said, we're going to show you what you can really do with black and white, and how that can be done to quality. And so for me, I'm starting my top 10 with something that I didn't expect to be this high, but it's just such a great film.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And for Tommy, it is 8th Grade, another one that's been brought up.
Oh,
So
yes.
look at that.
Excellent. Yeah.
Showed up for a lot of people. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For some reason, my mic is turning funny. My number 9. I'm surprised no one's mentioned this movie yet. I can't imagine that it's in all of your top 10s. Maybe it is. Maybe it's this good. I'm very surprised that I'm the first one to bring this movie up. But I saw it in L.A. with Tommy and friend of the show, Darnell Smith, and didn't think it was going to be a big movie, but it totally rocked my world, and I think it's totally special. It's another Amy Adams, right? Arrival?
That'll be on here.
It's coming up.
It's coming.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Oh, yeah. No,
that's amazing.
Yes.
I don't think we've talked about that yet. Maybe that's a movie we missed. If it's going to be on everybody's list, that's pretty cool. It's number 9 for me.
Awesome.
I know they're gonna. This is where some of the big franchises hit, and it's what are you gonna do? Again, corrective measure for Andy. Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Wow, cool.
I like that movie so much more now that the Skywalker saga is done, and I'm a big fan of what Johnson did in this movie. So.
So good. This is a movie for my number 9 that you guys, I'm not surprised it didn't end up on anyone else's list, or at least I'm not expecting it to. But it is a film that I think more people need to check out. It is a film that really struck me sideways, because on the surface it seems like just a survival movie from a plane crash and battling wolves, but it ends up being so much more when you look at what Liam Neeson's doing in Joe Carnahan's 2011 film The Gray, which I think is one of the great films of the decade. Just it hits me really powerfully every time I see it.
I haven't seen it, and I didn't notice it on any of the top lists that I saw. So that's really great that it's that big for you.
I doubt it will be, but there's a lot going on in there. I love it. It's it might be a tough one for you, JJ, because it's not straight up horror. It's definitely kind of just survival thriller. But I mean, there's some intense moments.
Unsettling.
If you don't like people being attacked by wolves, it's definitely there's a lot of that.
But who does?
Okay. Number 9. Another trailer rewind, and I think Andy I think this one was already on your list, but come on, when Ricky Baker says, "I didn't choose the Skunk's life, the Skunk's life chose me," he won my heart just as much as describing Sam Neill as Caucasian. Well, they got that wrong because you're obviously white. This movie, good. This movie, this is another one where I tell people, this is the perfect family movie, and they're like, "What?" I'm like, "No, just your family needs to sit down and watch this." And this is, oh my gosh, it's got to be in top lists everywhere, because it hits. It's the 4-quadrant film, and to me, I'm thankful for this film, and I thank Taika Waititi for just telling such a great story and doing it so well with such a great cast.
Hunt for the Wilder People.
Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, JJ.
Yes.
I was like, who's going to be first to say it?
I just talk about things.
So good.
Welcome to Steve, our stream of consciousness participant today.
Right.
All right, and this for Tommy, he throws Inception as the next one on his list of alphabeticals.
And he's the next one to bring it up, or the first one to bring it up. I think this is the first time for Tom, other than Babadook. I think that was the other one where he ended up being the first one to bring it up, but it shows up on my list later on too.
All right.
The next one for me, number 8, has been mentioned before, but not on anyone's list. I don't know when was the first time I saw this movie, but again, you're going to see that, or maybe you have seen that music is such a major thing to me when I see movies, and when it connects great. If people haven't seen this movie, everyone should. Tommy hadn't seen it, which is interesting, and I'm still trying to get him, now telling him that it's number 8 of the decade for me might swing him around, but everybody should see Sing Street. It is just a legendary movie. And I think it can connect with everyone, even though it's set in the UK, and it feels like a separate experience, but everybody lived through the kind of coming of age that comes in this movie. And then everybody everyone that's our age lived through the 80s. So the music of the 80s is rampant in this movie, and it's just done so well. So Sing Street, number 8 for me.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm glad that made it on your
Yeah.
list. I'm another big of the big, and this one, I feel like this one is representative of everything that all of these movies did for me. We've talked about so many of these movies on the show, but for me, I've got to include in the top 10 The Snap, Avengers Endgame. It was an incredibly wonderful and emotional and empowering experience, regardless of how much money it made.
It'll pop up again. I'm sure. My number 8. This is a film that for a lot of people, once they watched it at home, it dropped in their estimation, but not for me. It's a film that I find just as affecting at home as I did in the theater, which definitely was the bigger experience, but it still is a fantastic film. It is Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity.
That was funny. I typed out the title before you even said the word.
Yeah, you knew. I led that one pretty well, didn't I?
Gravity is number 36 on my list.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
We're getting into we're now at the point where I'm gonna probably diverge off in a direction, except for a couple things, because to me this is where the artfulness of film comes in, and I'm looking at things that are not just emotionally resonant, but have ideas that they're communicating, and sometimes that's not the most enjoyable experience, but for me it's an intellectually rewarding experience, and those are the films that are going to sort of permeate my top list here. So this is one that I don't think anybody's going to have in their list, but it's one that I think needs to be recognized from one of, I think, a filmmaker that does not make enough movies, but when he does make them, they just, I love them dearly. And he's only got 2 of them. And that is Shane Carruth's 2013 Upstream Color, which is a mind bender, crazy film with some interesting ideas. And I couldn't summarize this movie to you if I wanted, but I just love experiencing this film and the story that he takes me through.
Would I like it?
I don't know.
Well, you said a mind bender, so that's
well,
it's
it's not a conventional mind bender. It's I guess.
Do you even hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? It's not a conventional mind bender.
It's more of a pretzel-y type of thing. I don't know.
That's one that you got me to watch, and I'm really glad I did, because I loved it. Great.
Upstream Color. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's see. Next for Tommy, we have Inside Out.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Number 7 on my list is, Steve already brought it up, Miss Sloane. I'm glad you told the story about That's What You Asked For, because when I tell people about Trailer Rewind, what Trailer Rewind is about, a lot of people will ask, what's the movie that, that I missed that I should see? That movie, I can't understand why it didn't get a bigger notice. It is such a special movie for all the ways, not just for being a movie, but for the political statement it makes, for everything. It the story works on so many different levels, and Jessica Chastain she's a national treasure. Everybody should see Miss Sloane. It's my number 7 of the decade.
Awesome.
I'm glad to see that up there. It didn't make my list, but I'm really glad to see it climbing on yours. Mine is another one that I'm going to call representative of the director's work, because he's done a lot of things in this decade that are incredible. But I've got to start with the first one in 2010, that is Inception, Christopher Nolan. Talk about a movie that just, is a beautiful mind bender for a guy like me. I just think the work is great for everyone in there. Yes, we can sit around and poke holes in it, but my goodness, it's a perfect blend of action and mind bend, and it's great.
Quit your whole poking. It's going to be on my list too.
All right. My number 7 is my David Fincher entry for the decade. Before he decided to kind of slow down and move over to TV, this film, which was a 2010 film, just absolutely was just a peak Fincher for me. It is The Social Network.
Ah, cool. Not on my list, but great movie.
All right, Steve.
All right. Yeah. I think this is so high on the list just for personal reasons, because there's just something about this story that I connected with. Well, I don't want to say I connected with. I don't want to say I have any connection to this movie, because it's a bleak story, but it's got an amazing performance. But it's about struggles with faith, which is something that is any type of story like that, when done well, is going to end up high on my list, because it's just something that I think is just the way, I don't know if it's the way I was raised. And when you've got Ethan Hawke and Paul Schrader's First Reformed, it is not a movie that's a pleasure to sit through. To me, it's a rewarding journey that we take, but it's hard to say that this is entertainment. But to me, it's just done so well. And I think Schrader said it best when he said this wasn't going to be like anything else he did. It was going to be more in the vein of like Ingmar Bergman. And I haven't trod into Bergman territory, but if this is the type of thing that I can expect, I guess I'm going to end up becoming a Bergman fan sometime down the road. I don't know. But this one just really, I watched it because I was trying to make sure I saw like the best actor performances, and this one wasn't really that much on my radar, but it was a really rewarding experience for me.
What's it called again?
First Reformed.
First Reformed.
That's a tough watch, but it is a powerful film.
I have not seen that either.
Yeah. Tommy has Mother, Aronofsky's film.
Yay!
Yeah,
I'm not the only one. Number 6 for me. Again, as I'm getting to these movies, I'm still surprised that I'm the first ones to mention them. If I wasn't on this film board show, and I know you guys loved it, so maybe it'll show up on yours. For me, this movie, when I watched it, I felt like it was perfect.
Oh, the Monuments Men. Thank you, JJ.
Absolutely not. Take your Monuments Men and you go right back to where you came from. For me, it was Blade Runner 2049. And the thing about Blade Runner 2049, for me, I didn't like the first one. I know it's blasphemy. I saw it really late. So movies like that, I have a bunch of those that are kind of gaps for me, that I saw them late. So I didn't understand their cultural resonance. I didn't understand that kind of thing. When I saw 2049, it was a perfect movie for me. There were no flaws. And I didn't even have the connection to the first one. It's just such a special movie that it transcended that stuff for me. So it's number 6 of the decade, Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, it hasn't shown up because it's higher on lists.
That's what
for me. Yes. Yeah.
My number 6 is a movie that I'm going to go ahead and say it's not going to end up on anybody's list higher than mine. You remember when you saw Foxcatcher and you walked out saying, God, remember the last movie that Bennett Miller did? It is 2011's Moneyball.
Okay.
I adore this movie, almost irrationally so. I have such a great time with this movie every time I see it. And the script is fantastic. The concept is amazing. It's pretty much the only sports movie that I can watch again and again and again and again and again and again and get something new out of. Apart from just tearing up at the end of Rudy, whatever.
Didn't make my list, but it is a great movie.
No, thank you for putting that on there. That's that well deserved. Yes.
Great one. My number 6 is an entry in this franchise, which I think was just the peak of awesomeness for it in a franchise that's only gotten better and better. It's such a fun movie to watch, and it's a great turn for an animation director to make a great live action film, Brad Bird's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Interesting. Yeah. Top 10 on the MI.
I think the last Mission Impossible movie I saw was 2 or 3.
Well, that's you need to continue that because it's seriously just as
they get better.
They're not for me. I have bias against them. I come to it with bad it's not its fault. It's my fault. It's not you. It's me, Tom Cruise.
All right, Steve.
Okay, number 6. I guess you're going to see we got. Sci-fi is going to start showing up a lot here because it's a genre I really connect with, and I think it's gives the storytellers a great opportunity to tell really powerful stories. And I know I've done a good job as a parent when I can take my kids to a movie. I asked them how they enjoyed it, and one of them will tell me that they cried during the movie, and I thought, okay, and it's a sci-fi movie. Why is it going to make you cry? And she said that moment when he came back out of the black hole and his daughter was talking to him and she lost it. She broke down in 2014's Interstellar, which, I know a lot of people say Christopher Nolan is like a cold filmmaker, but this story of family and people have quibbles and issues. But for me, it is just one that I love experiencing. I think he did a great job with this one and an amazing cast as well.
Yeah, another Jessica Chastain turn.
Yes, exactly.
Tommy?
Tommy's number 6 was the Parasite.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
There you go.
Yep. Shows up again. Love it.
Yep.
All right, Steve.
Big break.
Our last little break.
Okay, so we're talking about movies, but I think one of the big trends is, and I think, Andy, you take a strong side on one of this, is the challenge of films versus all the great content coming out. Because I think one of the things of this decade that's going to be well remembered is Game of Thrones, which started back in 2011 and to me became just a cultural phenomenon. But we have, you have franchises that used to do that, but now TV is starting to take ownership of that. Plus, we also have now blurring of the lines between cinematic universes. Marvel did this with the whole, what was the show? The Avengers TV show thing that Pete was a big fan of.
Yeah.
What is that thing? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Age of S.H.I.E.L.D.
So that we have,
Age of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Age of S.H.I.E.L.D. We have that whole blurring of the lines of not only do you have to see the movies, but there's stuff in the TV shows, and now it's continuing as we now have sort of the spin-off stuff launching on Disney Plus it's not just about movies and TV, it's just the full-on media experience. So I was, want to take time. We've talked about all these great movies, but are there, quality TV shows of this decade that you think are, going to be long-standing as well, or that have ties, have sort of blurred the lines or crossed over to be part of that, cinematic world?
Go
Chernobyl.
Yes.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Absolutely Chernobyl. It far exceeds everything else on the list for me. It was an incredible addition to this decade by some incredibly talented filmmakers.
What is it on?
And
that's HBO.
Oh, it was HBO,
Oh, it's gone
but
now?
you can buy it on iTunes.
I need to watch
you can
it.
get it. I mean,
Yeah.
it is exceptional viewing and deeply emotionally engaging work. It would be certainly in my top 10 if we included this kind of stuff.
I think there's a lot that goes in here. I think we're in the golden age of TV, a new golden age of TV. I think for me, it's Black Mirror. Black Mirror is just so special and such a great place to experiment with what you can do. And I don't mean this in a pun sort of way. I mean this in terms of film and TV technology. And then, of course, it becomes a pun because that's literally the course of what this show is about. But like Bandersnatch, I mean, Black Museum in terms of the anthology aspect of it, it is what you're talking about, Steve. pulls itself together upon itself. And I think I've just seen so much there that blows my mind and makes me inspired and uncomfortable at the same time. I think it's legendary TV.
Well, it is. And I think, Pete, with Chernobyl, we get the example of don't cram this story into 2 hours. Or as we're starting to see, movies can start to get close to that 3-hour mark and audiences will still show up. But still, sometimes that's not even enough time to tell the whole story and do it well, and sort of to do the limited series of we're going to tell one story over 5 or 6 parts. And things that I think of are, they have, I think one of my most disappointing moments was hearing that Netflix announced there was going to be season 2 of The OA, because I thought that story just did what it needed to do so well and over sort of a limited series. And then when they said season 2, I thought, oh, please, no, don't do this. Don't start, trying to push another story on us. But then they did it. And then they said, no, there's no season 3. And I thought, no, you set this up. You have a larger story to tell. Why are you taking this away from me? But for me, that was one, I think, that year was The OA, and I think Westworld was the other one. Though I made that transition to this is cinematic storytelling on other media, HBO and Netflix, capturing that and being able to tell stories. Well, I realized that we're in this interesting transition point of what quality storytelling looks like, moving away from sort of the, I guess, for lack of a better term, sort of your soap, nighttime soap operas like ER, which
like Thornbirds and Shogun.
Shogun is just
like
your special miniseries. Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or even tying into Chernobyl the day after,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've moved beyond that into really the budgets are there to tell, big stories and doing it well. Andy, you have any? Because I know
I don't watch enough TV.
Yeah,
that's it's just there's the content. There's just so much content, and it's hard for me to kind of pick up on something that's going to last for so long. So I guess I would just have to say Black Mirror because. Like JJ said, he already said everything that you need to say. It's just, and it's perfect little, bite-sized episodes. Yeah. So that one for me is great. But I know Chernobyl is one that I definitely do want to check out at some point.
There's a song by Arcade Fire on their most recent album called Infinite Content. And they say, infinite content, we're infinitely content, which I think is wonderful. Okay, moving into the top 5.
Yeah,
are you ready to go there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so my top 5, Steve, you already brought it up. It was a movie that is a Trailer Rewind movie. It was a landmark for me. We've talked about from time to time on the show that I am now divorced. It was the last movie that I watched in the theater with my wife. It is The Lobster. And I only bring that up because, really, that's the last movie that you guys watched. Already separated and now going for divorce. Yeah, I think that movie can do that. It is hilarious, Steve. You're right. And it's so emotional. And it's so, they play it deadpan because there's so much going on. You have to watch it deadpan. And Yorgos Lanthimos, with The Favorite didn't show up on my list. I think it tried to sneak in and I pulled it off. But what Yorgos Lanthimos does is really special. And The Lobster blew my mind at a super emotional time in my life. So it's number 5 on my list.
Okay.
That is exceptional picking. For that to end up at number 5, that is peak. We've reached peak JJ. Is I think what's happened. Mine is. I think all of my top 5 have already been picked, and so Pete's top 5 is corrective again. This movie is one that it is again representative of the filmmaker. For sure, starting with the first one of the decade. It is also one of those movies that I regret recommending to people if I'm not available to watch it with them, just because I get now so much joy watching other people get so much joy out of this film that is Scott Pilgrim versus
Nice.
Excellent.
Okay.
Just like you, Pete, my top 5 have all been named before, so corrective. But and a number of them are ones that, as I said, I was only allowing each director to have one film in my top 25, if for no other reason than to help me thin it out. This is one of them. It is Christopher Nolan's Inception.
Nice.
I could easily have put Dunkirk or Interstellar on my top 25, but Inception's the one that I went with.
And my number 5 has already been mentioned by Andy, and it's tough. David Fincher is such a great filmmaker, but I think if I'm going to say what captures the decade well, I think The Social Network is the film that really captures, this decade very well.
Can I just say, and I'm just going to say this out loud because it is Pete's great regret of this entire episode. I don't have any David Fincher movies on my list, and all of them are on my source list, but in all of the shuffling, I forgot Fincher.
So
You
what would
shuffled
be,
off.
so if you isolate them, can you figure out what would be your top of those?
It would be.
Fincher,
It would absolutely be The Social
we
Network.
only
So I
had
don't
3
feel that
movies
bad.
in this decade.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we all respect and love Fincher for one
Yes.
reason or another.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand that. I don't think he's on my list either. So I see that's interesting as well.
Okay. Well, I thank goodness in the top 117 of the next reel, as he's on there a couple of times.
Okay.
I feel okay.
Very good.
Tommy's is Scott
Number 4.
Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
There you go.
Synchronicity is awesome.
I know.
Yeah.
I think that's the first and only, or well, I don't know about only, but the first pairing we've had of 2 people, same ranking, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
8th grade.
Eighth grade.
Eighth
That's
grade.
right.
Number
That's right.
13.
That's right, yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Number 4 for me is we've already brought it up. I don't need to speak too much about it, but I still feel like it got robbed. It's here at the Oscars, and that's Whiplash. J.K. Simmons. It blew my mind with that movie. I was deeply affected by that movie, and not because I have a personal reason to be necessarily. It was so well made and just a crazy, and I mean crazy in the word of like amazing. It's something that I didn't expect, and it changed everything for me that year, and that's Whiplash.
All right.
I want to pile on. Whiplash is my number 4 too,
nice.
and I just
All right.
want to add it is it's one of those movies that so deeply explores the pains and perils of what it means to be a teacher that I found myself very impacted by this movie.
And what a different
in way I didn't
perspective,
expect.
for you to say that it explores the teacher, because I, of course, didn't see that at all. It also explores what it's to be a parent, what it is to be a prodigy, what it is to be. I mean, all the roles are deeply affecting in that movie.
It challenges so many of those archetypes.
Yeah. My number 4 has already been mentioned, but what a film George Miller made in Mad Max Fury Road. And it's not even really a film about Max. It's about Furiosa and the amazing work that George Miller did with telling a story about these women and the power that they have. It was a great film, Mad Max Fury Road.
All right, my number 4. I think I did some overcorrecting and trying to prevent bias from recency. So this is a very recent one, but I debated whether it should be this high. But it was such a moving experience, and I think it is probably a perfect film, and that is 2019's Parasite.
Cool.
Nice.
That's high. That's great for the decade. That's wonderful.
And then
Tommy?
over on Tommy's list, he has The Social Network.
Oh, cool.
There we go. All right. Yep.
Welcome back, Fincher.
Yes, indeed.
Number 3 for me, Steve already brought it up from Trailer Rewind is I, Tanya. And the thing that I like to tell in the story about I, Tanya is that me coming from the world of journalism, we're in such a world right now where the truth is being assaulted. And the way this movie was made, it accounts for different truths in a way that I've never seen in a movie. It presents the stories of each individual from their own words, or at least attempts to do it from their own words, and then makes it dramatically spun. It's beautiful, it's remarkable, and it's subversive. It changes everyone's perspective on something that everybody knew or that everybody paid attention to at one point. I love I, Tanya, and it's my number 3 of the decade.
Nice.
Reminds me of that great film, The Last Jedi, when they did that too. That was awesome. My number 3
on the Casino
is
Planet.
my number 3 is also one that has already been mentioned, but again, I'll echo Steve. It is one of those sweet, perfect movies in a really not sweet, unsettling, I can't stop moving in my chair way. Parasite.
Nice.
Great movie.
I
My
gotta
number
see it. Wow.
My number 3 is from, we talked about actors who had a decade that really kind of was defining for them. I would say that this director's 2010s was top notch. There's only one film of his that wasn't, an instant like classic for me. It's Denis Villeneuve, who's, really, it's such an incredible decade of films, and it was so hard for me to thin this out to the one film that I was going to put on my list. And as much as it pains me to not have Blade Runner 2049 on my list, I did have to go with Arrival, because that is the film that hit me sideways. It just changed for me over the course of it, over and over again. And by the time I hit the ending and realized what was going on, I was like, that is just a perfect film. I mean, really just classic sci-fi film right there. So Arrival, number 3.
Okay. Well, it's okay, because I have Blade Runner 2049 as number 3. But Andy, you're right, because I struggled, because I should have Prisoners on here. I should have Sicario on here, but he has had. Yeah, that's the one I have not seen. That's the one that I need to see.
Which one?
And track down.
Incendi.
Yeah, from 2010.
Oh yeah.
But again, as I said, I'm heavily on the sci-fi, and as a fan of of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner from the 80s, I was concerned about what was going to happen with this one, but it's a perfect film. So.
Prisoners didn't make my list. It's a great movie. It didn't make my list. Tommy and I watched it in our big Memorial Day marathon before we did the re-ranking this year. Sicario on my list was number 47 out of 52. Great movies. What did Tommy have?
Tommy's number 3 was Whiplash.
See,
okay.
it's good.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that synchronicity. My number 2, we've already talked about Inception. I just want to tell my story with Inception. Inception came out, it's 2010, so this is why it was really key to me that we did 2010 to 2019 here. Saw it with a group of about 20 people. It's a big group. Let's just say it's a big number of people in Los Angeles when I was still living there. After, we were all on an email chain together, and we all started talking about the spinning talisman at the end of the movie, the marker, and everybody saw the little flinch of the marker, and everybody had to have their comment about what did that mean, and was it really going to fall, and was it reality, and was it not? Tommy and I did that little short a while back, The Mindbender. This is the kind of movie that I love the most, and because within that string, I mentioned we saw it with about 20 people. At some point, someone on an email string, and I know, Pete, you hate email, said, "Can you please take me off this list?" Because we were talking so much. It was so moving that everybody needed to get out their feelings about it. And I was personally offended that someone asked to be taken off the list, because this is what I see movies for, is to talk about it afterwards. This is like, it predates my Next Reel membership, but this is exactly why I see movies, so that we can talk about it like this. And that's why Inception is number 2 on my list.
Excellent.
The top 2 are insufferably difficult for me. I could switch them back and forth over and over and over again. And as I say these words, it actually hurts my own feelings for this movie, because I feel like it should be number 1, but it's not number 1. It is a movie that deeply impacted me and made me start my little online research notebook of travel plans to Iceland. It is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Nice. Yes.
This is just an exceptionally good film for a guy like me. It's one of Sean Penn's best films. And I mean that like with all heart. I adore this movie. Not to disregard Ben Stiller, who is also one of his very, very, I think it's his very best film. It is just truly soul searching film for me.
Yeah, I hear you. Right there with you, man. My number 2, I'm definitely going kind of more the less the intellectual movies that make me think about a lot of things, and more just things that I emotionally connected with. A lot of fun and just fantastic, and I don't have a problem with having these films up here for me. Number 2, such a great Spider-Man film. It's the best Spider-Man film, and it is definitely one of the best comic book movies made. It is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, that's so great, Andy.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
Love it. Love it. I think it belongs up there with this stuff. That's great.
My number 2, 2 and 3 are interchangeable. I mean, I couldn't decide. And for me, number 2 is Arrival, and I think what puts it ahead is the family dynamic of that. This is an amazing film, and it just blew my mind. And it's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And it just, and even though it's one of these films with like a twist to it, it's one that I find still rewarding when you know what that twist is. It's not one that like, oh, well, okay, it's all the surprise is what is the strength of the film, because all the front work, everything works so well on this. And it's, if you don't like science fiction films, you have to go see this, because it's so much more than just about the science and the arrival of aliens. It's really about family. And to me, that's what makes it my number 2.
All right. Tommy's is the animated short World of Tomorrow by Don Hertzfeldt. One of his films that I haven't seen, so I'll have to check that one out.
Does anybody know about it? Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Oh, yeah. Don Hertzfeldt stuff is just fantastic. Definitely check his animation out.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. His animation style is sort of like stick figure-y stuff, but this is it's a short.
I think you can watch it on YouTube.
I think it's on
YouTube. It's on Don Hertzfeldt's Vimeo channel.
Okay, yeah. So it's out there. It's 17 minutes
of Tomorrow.
Correct. Yeah, and it's about, IMDb says a little girl is taken on a mind-bending tour of her distant future. And I think his stuff is, I want to say sarcasm, but he's got a pessimistic outlook on things. And so there's
Me too.
Comedy and tragedy, but it is one that is definitely, for a short film, definitely check it out. Yeah,
cool.
Rated G, so no cursing, no blood, out of Don Hertzfeldt. So speaking of him, his shorts, my oldest daughter uses as her gauge of whether people's sense of humor will mesh with hers, because she likes to show them his Oscar nominated, or is it Oscar winning short, Rejected, and also the what is it, Wisdom Teeth or Loose Tooth or whatever, which is another short. So she will sit down with people and engage their response to say, okay, is this somebody that gets my sense of humor? That's one of her friend tests.
She has a psych eval for friend development. That's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, let's move into number ones.
Number one.
I think everybody should have a little blurb about their number one. Andy, I was happy to hear that you actually mentioned this, because I did expect to be ridiculed a little bit, because I listened to your guys' show about this one. It's Interstellar for me. I've shared this with so many people. I weep uncontrollably with this. My favorite character in Interstellar is Tars. I say anecdotally all the time when something needs encouragement, I just constantly say, "Come on, Tars! Come on, Tars!" I love this movie with all my heart. And one of the things that you guys said on the show that was really tough for me was one of the things that you didn't like about it was that love became a metric. Right? It became a physical force, or a force that the universe was subjected to. And this, for me, was the grand conceit of this movie, because it's something that I'll just speak for myself. I don't understand wholly as a human. And I loved the concept that was brought to this movie to say, we don't need to understand it. We just need to live it. And it's so exceedingly moving to me every time. That the one thing I will say about this is we used to have a questionnaire on thenextreel.com where as hosts came to the show, they would fill out this questionnaire, all the different questions and all this stuff. And at some point there was a question, maybe Pete, you can help me with this, with who is a groundbreaking filmmaker or something that in history or something that you follow. And this was, I joined the show, I think in 2012 or 2013. And at that point I had to say, I hope this counts, but it's Christopher Nolan. And as you see for me, number one and number two are both Christopher Nolan. I will see anything that he makes, because I know that there is enough care and interest in the film behind it that I'm going to want to see it. So Interstellar is my number one of the decade.
I thought you were just working some alphabetical thing, because you go with I, Tonya, Inception, Interstellar.
That may be a winner for me, Hollywood. If you want me to like it, start it with I.
My number one pick, obviously it's already been said, and again, representative of the filmmaker's work. It is, I didn't want it when we saw the trailer. I didn't think we needed it. I didn't think the world had room for it, and I am delighted to have been proven wrong in 2018 with Denny's Blade Runner 2049.
Nice.
That was, again, perfect filmmaking for me.
Boy, he might be the director most populated in the top five, which is great to see. Although Nolan seems to be up there too. My number one, yeah, I love these movies. I've kind of grown into the MCU. I wasn't quite the fan initially, but I really kind of grew into it. I was endlessly impressed with the way that they shaped it. And by the time we hit the end with Avengers Endgame this past year, I just was really floored by the ride that they took me on. And I know it's probably a little strange to have that as your number one, but it was an incredibly affecting film for me, and I was just amazed with the work that everybody put into the whole franchise. So Avengers Endgame ended up number one for me.
Awesome.
Not surprising there, because I knew I know my Andy.
Although apparently Artsy Andy is no more, because
no, it's Mr.
Pete.
MC.
I'm Popcorn Andy now.
No. It's a transformation. Pete loves horror and Andy loves the MCU. So no, it's a transformation that's happened over the decade, I guess.
Yep.
My number one shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I'll see if Andy can guess. We'll play our game. Andy, do you know what
at this point, I don't even remember what everybody said.
This one hasn't been mentioned. One hasn't been mentioned, and I know I'll get an eye roll for this one. Does that give you a clue?
Doesn't. No.
Okay. So I guess my background, English major, master of fine arts in creative writing, poetry. So when movies speak in metaphor or rely on non-traditional narratives, that is something that is going to strike my heart.
I've got to type it into my spreadsheet already.
It's going to strike my heart, right there in my soul. And Terrence Malick did that with 2011's Tree of Life. Brad Pitt, Jessica Chastain, Pete's favorite actor of the decade, Sean Penn, right? Just, a compelling narrative about family and growing up. And for me, it just worked so well together. To me, I can't think of a greater film for me for this decade. Clearly not a film for everybody, but it's one that is at the top of my list across.
I haven't
Malik's
seen it.
Malik's a challenging director.
I haven't seen it, and I don't know whether I'm ready to be challenged in that way by him. Before we do Tommy's number one, because I think it's really interesting and I want to get into it, there's some movies that we didn't talk about that I think are kind of remarkable that on the list. No one had La La Land on their list. That was number 26 for me. No one had Get Out on their list.
Oh, yeah.
That was close.
Number 30
That's kind of shocking. It's 29 for me. I also had Ex Machina. I thought was a really interesting short movie.
Ex Machina.
Machina, thank you. Ex Machina, Ex Machina. Sure, all of that. Snowpiercer, I thought was interesting. That's one that we did on the show as well.
That was on mine just a little bit after.
And then I think the only other one that I would want to mention is What We Do in the Shadows. We talked about Taika Waititi, it's just those movies. I was amazed by what came out of Australia and New Zealand over the last decade, because in the early parts of my life, I didn't know that I was connected to that. But I think we saw a lot of great movies from them, and that movie is the most meta thing that I've ever experienced. That was at number 44 for me.
Nice.
I'm curious what your biggest surprises and regrets are off of this list. Do you have any of that sort of sucker punch, like, oh my gosh, I wish I had room for this, or I can't believe that I'm so thrilled that this one made it on the list?
Well, as I already said, I was really, because I had set that rule for myself where I was only letting each director on at once. Blade Runner 2049 was the one that hurt the most to not include on my my top list. But I mean, I had my other directors that I had duplicates of: Wes Anderson, Christopher Nolan, Bong Joon-ho, Ari Aster, and the Russo brothers. So I definitely had some hard ones to cut out.
Oh, as I looked at like my top, flick chart, there were things that were in there. I'm like, well, I enjoy this movie, but does it merit saying like greatest of the decade type of thing? So it's like there's some personal things in there, like, again, being a big fan of sci-fi, like The Martian is one of my big films that I just want it to be up there, but again, I had so many other things in there. And then, of course, going in the teenage realm, I will always rave about Me and Earl and the Dying Girl as just a really powerful film. But I think it works, but these other ones I think just have a greater resonance to them, or there's something more. La La Land, La La Land and Whiplash, that's a filmmaker that I just don't love the trajectory he's going. And maybe Whiplash should have been maybe closer on maybe at the bottom of my list, because I really, really connect with that. And La La Land is one that I have mixed feelings about, JJ, on that one, because it is on according to my flick chart, it's up there, but it's one that just has not aged as well for me. So I think that's yeah, those are the sort of my regrets on some of those things. Of what, I think Black Klansman is, I'm glad that it's up there, but it's hard for me to find space.
Mine, Pete, we mentioned Wes Anderson before. My favorite Wes Anderson was Moonrise Kingdom. That was in there, 41. Yeah. Silver Linings Playbook also showed up on my list, which I think deserves mention for just kind of something that's a little different there. And then we didn't really do a whole lot of comedy because, it's hard to kind of bring up comedy. But I think a movie over the decade that I think merits mention too is Crazy Rich Asians. It's actually a really solid film that deserved kind of all the attention that it got. It was number 50 of the decade for me in the list as well.
There were some of the big surprises, the regrets. I mean, I'm full of regrets. Coherence and Predestination, and I mean, Chef, Safety Not Guaranteed. Me, Earl, and Dying Girl was on my regrets list. I just didn't quite make the list. I think the biggest regret, though, is when we did on the show, and I think it was a listener's choice, and it took me by complete surprise that I'm even thinking about it as hard as I am years after we talked about it, and that's Force Majeure, 2014. Wow. That had a surprisingly big impact on me and on me as a father and a husband, and I don't think the show that we did on it represents the impact that it's had on me since we've talked about it. And so it surprised me that I'm still thinking about it. The biggest surprise, I think, that even crested on my list was Knives Out. That movie, I hope, is not suffering the curse of recency, but I'm obviously still thinking about that and just the way it was structured and just how smart it was played. I can't wait to see it again.
That's awesome. So what was really Tommy's number one?
List. Number one, and it's not alphabetical, so I can only go into it assuming this really is his number one film
of the decade.
I cannot believe that we're setting this up as if we believe it. I cannot believe that we're letting that go.
It is.
How else do you wish we could do this?
He added that in at the last minute, it looks like. It says that little edited comment on there. Yes.
I just watched it.
It is Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas.
Sorry, Tom. That's with you forever.
Yes.
Now.
How many stars?
Number one of the decade. According to Wikipedia, it is at a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So
love it. 0%.
Gotta be.
Always the contrarian?
It could be. Yes.
That the word we use.
Should I rattle off real quick the top 10 that we ranked on our show over the year?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So number 10 comes in with our David Cronenberg series. It's Dead Ringers.
Okay.
Number 9, just released today. It is the last of our Steve Martin series, All of Me.
Wow.
Then the Rocky franchise is going to have quite a showing here. Number 8, Rocky Balboa. Number 7, Creed 2. Number 6, Rocky. And number 5, Creed.
Wow.
I guess we liked that franchise.
But before you go on to the top 5, we should say these are the top shows that the next
that
reel
we
covered only in 2019.
Correct.
So different than a decade here.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Yeah. Okay, number 5.
Number 4, I already did number 5 was Creed.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Number 4, A Star is Born. The most recent one, the Bradley Cooper version. Number 3, we had Gaslight from our Ingrid Bergman series. Number 2, also Ingrid Bergman, Notorious. And number 1, also Ingrid Bergman, Casablanca.
Yay. Good job, guys.
No showings from the Robin Hood series, the Spanish Apartment trilogy, or from, we were finishing up our 1968 Best Picture series at the beginning of the year. And so none of those showed up. But I would say that these all were better than those.
Well, since the film board only existed in this decade, I was looking at how the film board, in knowing that it's limited number of films that were covered, but to see sort of what overlap there might have been between my top films and the film board. And it's interesting because JJ, you mentioned a couple of these that didn't show up on any list, but actually our film board number 10 is Doctor Strange. Number 9 is World War Z. 8, Get Out, one that again I was surprised. I thought that might have made it into some.
Yeah.
7, The Last Jedi. 6, Edge of Tomorrow. 5, Force Awakens, and then we get into familiar territory. 4, Logan. 3, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. 2, Blade Runner 2049, and 1, Avengers Endgame is where the film board sort of falls. So yeah, didn't surprise me in the top part, but yeah, I was curious to see if World War Z, Get Out, if those were going to make it onto list because they're top of the film board there, and Knives Out right there at number 11, right there just on the cusp.
It does surprise me that Get Out didn't get represented on any of our lists. That is, I think, probably the biggest collective surprise.
Yes.
Especially
yes.
Tommy. I think Tommy might have gotten there with one more trip around the alphabet.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, Get Out, I found myself, I think this is interesting in terms of how, I'm curious how you guys put your list together. I mean, I started with my Letterboxd and my Flick chart, and then after I pulled those lists out and put them in a spreadsheet, I applied all the rules of getting rid of franchises, multiple directors, screwed up here and there. But I also, even though Get Out is higher generally on my list, if you go by the mechanics of those sites, it got pushed down as I started moving things around and applying the rules and the filters. And it surprised me that one actually probably suffered the most, maybe incorrectly because of my own mechanics.
Yeah, that also got shuffled out of my top 25 because it is on my top 25 over on Flickchart. But as I was looking at that, I'm like, God, there's a lot of movies that should be in there. And so as I was just kind of shuffling things around, it did get pushed out, and I just didn't end up making room for it. Just like Edge of Tomorrow, which also likely could have been in there. A Quiet Place got pushed out, didn't end up in there.
Yes.
Wind River, Room, The Revenant.
Wild Tales.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff. So.
Interesting.
It's hard. It's hard.
This was a
fun,
very challenging and fun exercise. Yeah.
Very true.
I loved it. I'm ready to apply it to the 2000s now. So much fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, to this lengthy SatMat, but hopefully it's an enjoyable one. And thanks all for listening and supporting us over on Patreon and all of that good stuff.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hondo New Year.